welcome to episode 3 of Art Uncensored. It's me, again, your one and only host. I promise I will eventually have guests on here. I just kind of live in a remote Irish location right now, but guests are on the horizon. It is exactly 19 days until I start traveling again, and then there will be loads of cool people on this podcast, and you will not have to listen to my monologues any longer. First things first. We have even more downloads. We're almost to 50, and again, it's not a big number, but it's a big number to me, so that's super, super cool, and I'm super pumped and haven't given up yet, so that's all really good. And fun fact, Irish good weather continues. It's now been a month pretty much without rain, and it's been really warm, not a lot of wind. It's so great. I say too much, but you just can't believe how nice it is. I've been doing my yoga outside, doing those handstands, and last but not least, and pretty much the inspiration for this episode, happy Pride, everybody. If you're not a Pride person, then I guess not happy Pride to you, but seriously, happy Pride to everybody, for lesbians, gays, bis, everybody, the supporters even. I'm just so happy that this Pride it's apparently it's 2018, everybody. I'm really happy. So, without further stuttering or usage of the word here we are, episode 3, and we're gonna talk about Andy Warhol tonight. And seriously, I love Andy Warhol. He's my idol. If I could be an old man from that time period, I would be him. He's my style icon. I just love everything about him. So I'm going to introduce the topic with 3 quotes because I couldn't pick one. First one, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. He's just such a sarcastic asshole. I love him. This entire episode is just going to be me going, ugh, I love him. Art is what you can get away with, which is true. It is. Don't ask me how. They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. That's the real quote. The other 2 were kind of just because I couldn't decide, but the real quote, they always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. It's very true. You can wait and wait and wait, but unless you change, you're not going to see much of a difference. Anyway, we're talking about Andy Warhol today because it's Pride, and he was gay, and I already talked about Leonardo da Vinci, and did I say I love Andy Warhol? Anyway, 10-minute history spiel, as usual. It's not going to be 10 minutes, and this is the learning part of the podcast. So, Andy Warhol was the 3rd child born to Czechoslovakian immigrant parents, and he was born in Pittsburgh. He had 2 older brothers, John and Paul. Why they didn't name him Ringo, I don't know. As a child, he was really smart and creative, which is characteristic of an artist, and it was kind of cool, in contrast to last week's episode where Van Gogh was kind of this moody, depressing character. Andy was much more open-minded, very interested in art, very creative. Not to say that Van Gogh wasn't, it's just it's a contrast. And his mother was she wasn't a professional artist, but she did enjoy painting and whatnot, and she used to encourage him quite a bit and actually gave him his first camera when he was 9. And he was known to suffer from a nervous disorder that actually kept him at home for a lot of his childhood, and when he was at home, he would listen to the radio and collect pictures of movie stars and make collages, and hello, he's literally me, listening to podcasts and cutting things out of magazines, which I still do. I just have boxes of newspaper clippings in my room, so if I die, could someone go through those? Don't throw them away, please. It took a long time. Anyway, he was exposed constantly to current events from a very young age, and this actually, a lot of people accredit his later obsession with pop culture and celebrities to this early on exposure. So when he was 14, his father passed away, and he left only enough money for one of the boys to go to college, which is really sad, but also highly relatable. And it was actually decided by the family that Andy would benefit the most from going to college. Which, wow, good on you, John and Paul. Thanks for putting our boy through school. So he graduated from high school at the age of 16 in 1945. And, like, shoot me, but I didn't realize he was born, like, a long time ago, because I remember him being alive in, like, the 70s. I mean, I don't remember, but I know he was alive in, like, the 70s, and I just never realized, like, that he was old in the 70s. Anyway, he attended Carnegie Institute of Technology, which is now Carnegie Mellon University, and he received formal training in pictorial design. And he graduated in 1949, moved to New York City, and worked as a commercial illustrator. And he was actually, this was really cool to me, before he was a famous artist, he was a famous artist. Like, he was really, really good at what he did. He was good at his job, and he got a lot of awards for it. So he moved to New York and worked as a commercial illustrator. His first project was for Glamour magazine, for an article entitled "Success is a Job in New York." And throughout the 50s, he continued his extremely successful career in commercial illustration and worked for magazines such as Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and The New Yorker. Because he's so cool. Vogue is honestly the only, those are like Snapchat news things. Vogue is like the only one I ever read. And I know it's like shit, but it's like the only one. I'm like, look at me, I'm reading Vogue. Anyway, he also produced advertising and window displays for local New York retailers, and his work with Miller & Sons, for which his whimsical blotted line advertisements were particularly noticed, gained him local notoriety. So people saw his art in the windows, and then he won a bunch of awards for it. So that's cool. In the early 1950s, he shortened his name from Warhola to Warhol, mood, and decided to leave his job and become a serious artist. Also mood. Since he had a lot of expertise in commercial art, and he combined it with his obsession with American pop culture, and that created like his most notable works. In 1952, he exhibited 15 drawings based on the writings of Truman Capote, whom I also love. I kind of wish this was more like honestly, I could do this. There are no rules. This is my podcast, but like, I kind of want to open it up to famous authors too, just because they're so cool and I'm a nerd. Anyway, in his first individual show at the Hugo Gallery in New York was where he exhibited these 15 drawings. And he most notably exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and he participated in his first group show there in 1956. And he actually, I like this, he took notice of other emerging artists and admired them, and then used their work to inspire his own, to expand his artistic experiments, which I really like, because all of us look back at the Renaissance artists or whoever else, and they're in the past, and we try to emulate them and use them and study them. But he, not to say he didn't do that, but he looked at what was going on around him at the time and like worked off of that, and I thought that was super, super cool. So in 1960, he began using advertisements and comic strips in his paintings, and these were some early examples of pop art, and were characterized by more expressive and like painterly styles that included really recognizable brushstrokes and were loosely influenced by abstract expressionism. And I thought that was also really cool, because it's like a lot of art today. Like if you go if you go to like Home Goods or Target or I don't know, any home store, you can see where great artists like Warhol, their techniques were replicated to be mass produced, and I think that that's really, really cool. Like, without him, we wouldn't necessarily have, like, home decoration would not be the same, guys. Anyway, subsequent works such as his Brillo boxes would mark a direct rebellion against abstract expressionism because it was like so perfect and it doesn't even suggest brushstrokes, it's just those. So he was actually one of the most influential artists of the second half of the 20th century. I love the way I phrased that. Great note-taking, Em. And he created some of the most recognizable images ever produced. Like, who doesn't think Warhol and automatically think Campbell's soup can? Or Marilyn Monroe? Or the Elvis painting? Like, it's just always... very few people I know couldn't think of something to do with Andy Warhol. And he challenged idealist visions and personal emotions conveyed through abstraction. He embraced pop culture and commercial processes to produce work that appealed to the general public. And this is also something I found really cool. He knew his audience, and he knew what they wanted to see, and so he always painted subjects that were relatable. Campbell's soup. What household in America in the 1950s didn't have a Campbell's soup can? Like, the guy's a freaking genius. He was one of the founding fathers of the pop art movement and expanded the ideas of Duchamp by challenging the definition of art. That's where we kind of get into that quote, art is what you can get away with. He's on one 24/7, guys. Would have loved to have done drugs with Andy Warhol, TBH. Did I just say TBH? It's a good thing it's just me, alone on my couch. Oh yeah, by the way, this episode is brought to you by yet another cider. So, thank you, Irish beer. So his artistic risks and constant experimentation with subjects and media made him a pioneer in pretty much every category of visual art. And he had this really unconventional sense of style and a celebrity entourage, and he just climbed and just kept climbing up, and he continues to climb up every day. And I think that's really cool because he said, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes, and he continues to be famous even though he's dead. Yay, morbid M. So he actually, he wanted to be famous, and I think that's where the extra push came in. Like, he grew up in this poor little family, only one of them could go to college, and he didn't want to be a nobody, so he just kept pushing himself, and I think that's where he got the drive for a lot of his experiments. Anywho, through the joint efforts of the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts, Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Institute, and Dia Center for the Arts, the Warhol Museum was opened in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1994, and that's how his legacy continues. That might have actually been a 10-minute history, so it was, I think. We're at 14 minutes. I don't know how long my intro was. Anyway, that was probably a pretty good history. Anyway, fun stuff time. There's actually not really any conspiracy theories, but this guy was so freaking amazing and insane and just the most unique individual ever that this is probably going to be my favorite episode, and the conspiracy theories were not necessary. This guy was just so cool. So, backstory, he wasn't only an artist, he actually did a whole lot of other stuff. Obviously. That was horrible. Let me rephrase. He wasn't only, I don't know how to phrase it, because movies are also art. He was a visual artist in every sense of the term. because he also produced plays, movies, and had a TV show. And his first movie was called Sleep, and it was a 6-hour-long, never-ending masterpiece of his friend sleeping. Another mood. That is something I would do. 9 people attended the premiere. 7 of them stayed and watched the movie. 2 of them left within the first hour. He later created at least 60 movies, including Kiss, Blowjob, Eat, Shoulder, Couch, Face, Kitchen, Horse, Suicide, Drink, Closet, Sunset, and Bitch. It's like a little poem. Second fun fact, he almost died when he was shot 3 times in the chest by Valerie Solanas. By the way, my best friend is Valerie. Valerie, I know I talk about him, but did you have to shoot him? Valerie was an ardent feminist and one of many who thought Warhol was abusive and controlling, and she actually believed deeply that he deserved to die. And he was pronounced dead at one point, but then was revived and slowly recovered, because we will always live to fight another day. Fuck yeah. Valerie was a founder of a club called Scum, Society for Cutting Up Men, and she was the only member of the group. And some backstory on her, just because I love tangents and attempted murder. She moved to New York City in the mid-1960s and was working as a writer, and that's when she met Andy Warhol and asked him to produce her play Up Your Ass. And she gave him her script and then later accused him of losing, and then later on was like, yep, you know what, he stole it. And he kind of just didn't care. Like, he was Andy Warhol. He didn't need to give a fuck, so he didn't. Afterwards, she demanded compensation for the script, and he hired her to perform in his film, I, A Man, and he paid her $25. And I think that's really funny. She was like this super feminist, and she was in a movie called I, A Man. So in 1967, she began self-publishing the Scum Manifesto, and this guy, Maurice Giordiaz, offered to publish her writings, and she kind of believed that what he was saying was that he would own her writings, so she totally misinterpreted the whole publishing thing, and she was convinced that this guy, Giordiaz, and Warhol were actually conspiring to steal her work about cutting up men. So she went out and bought a gun. What an American. She went to the factory where she found Warhol and shot him 3 times. She missed the first 2 and actually hit him the 3rd time. So she's a true stormtrooper, an American stormtrooper. She also shot an art critic and attempted to shoot Warhol's manager point blank, but then the gun jammed. She then turned herself into the police and was charged with attempted murder, assault, and illegal possession of a gun. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and pleaded guilty to reckless assault with intent to harm. Served a 3-year prison sentence, including treatment in a psychiatric hospital. After her release, she continued to promote cutting up men, the Scum Manifesto, and then she died in 1988 of pneumonia. Like I said, this guy's entire life was a wild ride. Unfortunately, he did later die, as we all do, in a hospital on February 22nd, 1987 from a heart attack because the hospital just kept pumping him with fluids and it overdosed. And in my, when I read this article, I pictured, that he exploded. And that was really sad. Another fun fact, he was the producer of the first record album by the Velvet Underground and painted the cover of their first album entitled The Velvet Underground and Nico. And I really like this because it was the Velvet Underground had a lot of songs that were considered really way out there for the time period, and they were super shocking, and I like this word, kinky, and it was just he's such an icon. God, I love him. In 1957, he won the prestigious Art Directors Club Medal for a shoe advertisement. do what it takes. He began designing in advertisements after that, and then went on to specialize in illustrating shoes. Props to him, because it's like the one thing I can't do. I mean, I could. It's just hard. He worked in a number of media, but his most famous works were created using silkscreen and lithography. And after he achieved some fame, he began to use silkscreen to create his art and to mass produce images. So it's really cool. He'd come up with a design and then just print it. Again, he'd mass print it, and that's how his art got spread around quite a bit. And his 1973 portrait of Mao is one of the best known examples of this process. More fun facts. I just have my notes for this episode was literally just bullet points of fun facts that don't really build off of each other. They're just all these crazy great things about Andy Warhol, because he's such a guy. He would claim, if you want to know all about me, just look at the surface of my paintings and me, and there I am. There's nothing behind it. And that's just a beautiful way of saying, I leave everything on the canvas, or all that I am is my art. Maybe he didn't mean that at all. That's just my interpretation. In addition to creating art, he started an interview magazine, opened a nightclub, had 2 cable TV shows called Andy Warhol's TV and Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes for MTV. And again, he's just so fucking cool. I love the idea of he wanted to do something, and so he did it over and over again. And I definitely relate, because it's anything I put my mind to, I do. I mean, this podcast, for example, I don't really give a shit if anyone listens. I'm just doing it because I wanted to do it. And it's just a really cool way of building self-confidence and just being who you are. And I love that. He was just so into himself, and not in a selfish way. I mean, he was probably selfish. All humans are selfish, but he was just into his image and his character, and just being exactly who he wanted to be when he wanted to be him. So to tie in, he did have a very interesting sense of style. He wore silver wigs and eventually dyed his hair silver. And after being told he had lazy eyes, he started wearing opaque glasses that had tiny pinholes for him to look through. This guy was probably blind on top of it. But he actually reminds me of the David Bowie in The Goblin King. Or, Labyrinth. He played the Goblin King. But, it's such a mood. And this was my favorite, because this is also, again, I say mood too much, but so relatable. In high school, the art club kicked him out because he was better than all of them. Yes! It's actually not much of a surprise to hear that his, wig, or his hair wasn't his own, but he owned over 40 wigs. And this New York wig maker chick sewed them from hair imported from Italy, and I found this so funny. In 1985, a girl snatched off his wig at a book signing, and Warhol wrote in his diary, "I don't know what held me back from pushing her over the balcony." Same. He had a foot fetish, and he actually kept time capsules, which I thought was also cool, because it's also something I do, and he's just me reincarnated, or I'm him reincarnated. So in his time capsules, he kept all these drawings of feet and shoes, and how about that? He had a job as a shoe illustrator, and he was literally probably just doing it to satisfy his fetish. Same. I don't have a foot fetish, but I can see where he was going with that. Genius. But in this time capsule, he had a mummified human foot from ancient Egypt. And the curator of anthropology at Carnegie Museum reckons he picked it up at a flea market. And, dude... Does anyone, listening have a mummified foot that they found and decided to keep? Disembodied feet. My fave. And he was literally a pack rat. He collected everything. These are just some of the things that they found when he died in his 4-story apartment, and he had a 4-story townhouse and a storage unit, and it was literally full of what his friends referred to as quote-unquote Andy's stuff. And some examples are airplane menus, unpaid invoices, pizza dough, pornographic pulp novels, newspapers, stamps, supermarket flyers, and cookie jars. I also know, this is actually, I don't have a source for this, except for this book that I had when I was a kid, and it was called, like, Lives of the Artists or something, and they were illustrated with these super weird giant heads. But Andy Warhol was my favorite one to read, and it said that he had, like, a thing for mac and cheese, and he would pretty much only eat mac and cheese, and that's also relatable. I went through a period in my life where I would only eat Annie's gluten-free white mac and cheese. It had to be white. It obviously had to be gluten-free because I'm allergic to gluten, but it had to be the one in the light purple box. I'm sorry, Dad. I just wanted to be Andy Warhol. Anyway, the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh now has 641 boxes of stuff. Listeners, send me money so I can go live there. And he lived by this motto of never declutter. And I'm actually I'm not a hoarder. People that know me are probably laughing listening to this. I'm not a hoarder, but I do save certain things that would be worthless to literally everybody else. And it's not like I can't throw things away. I actually methodically go through and throw things away all the time, and people are always like, Emma, won't you want that? I'm like, no, leave me alone, don't touch that. Anyway, when I was a kid, I collected stamps. I currently, whenever I go to a bar or a pub and the coasters are cool, I steal the coasters. I like shot glasses, and whenever I work in a restaurant when I'm not traveling, and whenever a cool, notable person would come into the restaurant, I would there's a thing when you take an order or whatever, you put you can name the table, and if it was a person of interest, you'd name the table after that person, or whatever. You get the idea. So I would take the tickets once the orders went out and keep them. So I have Carlos Santana, I have Madonna, I have a bunch of basketball players, football players, the writer of Orange is the New Black and Poussey came into my restaurant, or the restaurant. I have that one. I have a lot of cool order ticket stuff things. I also save movie tickets and train passes. I anything really that relates to my travels or my life. So it's not they're meaningless. I don't collect pizza crusts. I'd die. But oh yeah, Monster cans. I have over 400 empty Monster cans because I'm a caffeine freak, and Monster cans are my life. But really, secretly, I'm just an overachiever and want to be Andy Warhol. I actually really think it's funny because, the things I don't do because I want to be Andy Warhol. I do them because I'm me, and that just kind of aligns with him. So maybe I am him reincarnated. It would make sense. He died, and then I was born. Would I know? Here's a question for the audience. If you die and are reincarnated, do you know that you've been reincarnated? Do you have are you like me where you're just obsessed with your past self? Which is also a mood. If I died and was reincarnated, I would totally stalk me. Not because I'm self-centered, just because I'm weird. No, but this is actually a valid question that I have, and now I'm going off on a tangent because I forgot to write a conclusion for my notes, and so now I'm just in shock thinking about, wow, if you're reincarnated, do you know you're reincarnated, or are you oblivious? Do you get to find out? Or I don't know, you get struck by lightning and someone tells you? I don't have the answers. Anyway, some other things I really liked about Andy Warhol, and these are just coming off the top of my head now, is I love his whole look. I always remember him, he was very Parisian, judging from pictures, like, that I looked at, like, and I definitely relate to the striped sweater, dark glasses look. I like anything edgy. I feel like we would have been friends, and he's such an icon to, like, the gay community, which is why I decided to feature him in this episode, because it's Pride Month. And, like, I don't know, when I think of pop culture, it's always, I don't think of modern pop culture, I think of Andy Warhol and his epic pop culture-ness. We'll never live up to him. We can't. And I told you, this episode is going to be a monologue of me fangirling about Andy Warhol because, again, I love him. Did you guys know? I love him. Yeah, he was gay, actually. Like I said, like 4 times already. And people wondered, actually, if he was, like, he was flamboyantly gay, but a lot of people thought he died a virgin, but then that was proved wrong, obviously. But that was, like, the only conspiracy theory I found. Here, let me just type in, oh, look, more fun facts. Oh, I forgot about this one. He used urine for paintings. He'd, like, do these, he'd prep canvases with copper paint and then squirt urine all over them to oxidize it. And they're really cool, but I can't imagine how bad that would have smelled. Ooh. And another one that I liked was he was criticized for creating art just to make money. And I'm sorry, if you're good at making money, then you should make money. Like, he quoted, "Making money is art, and working is art, and good business is the best art." And it's so true. It's like, if you're a writer, you have to get paid for anything. So I just think it's funny they, like, criticized him, and so yeah, that's my 35 minutes on Andy Warhol. I really wish I could talk more about him. Like, I wish I had more notes, but I blame my best friend for distracting me, so I didn't actually dedicate the 7 hours I usually dedicate to research. This was kind of like a quickie, but there's just so much. What's gonna end up happening is I'm gonna go back and, like, revisit all the artists I've already talked about from, like, different angles, because there's just so much that you can't cram into a 45-minute episode, and this episode is going to be arguably much shorter. But anyway, that's Andy Warhol. I love him. I'm like stuck on that thought, though. What if I am him? Just stares off into space dramatically. I'm so happy no one watches me record these. Anyway, closing stuff. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, what do I always say? Oh yeah, stalk us on social media. You can find our Instagram and Facebook at our Uncensored podcast, and then Twitter is Art Uncensored PC. Sorry, there's like a pause in that. I couldn't remember which one was which, but it's the Twitter is the PC because it's the shorter one. And then if you have questions or comments and don't like using social media, you can always email us at artuncensoredpodcast@gmail.com. If you like me, please like me. I don't know. If you like me, you can visit my Instagram at usepaintwater.com. Not .com. It's usepaintwater. It's an Instagram username. Sorry, I've got a fit of the giggles this evening. To quote Harry Potter, I've had too much giggle water. Anyway, you can find my Instagram, usepaintwater, Jesus, or my website, www.everythinginvinyl.com. And yeah, beyond that, I don't know, I have Spotify. Don't stalk my Spotify. All the credits of this podcast go to me. I did everything except the music that's done by Benjamin Dougherty. And like, I realized I never give him a social media shout out. So if you want to check him out on SoundCloud. I don't know how to pronounce his SoundCloud name, so I'll include it in the comments or in the description of this episode, along with a list of all my sources as usual. Thank you guys. Have a great night.